Hey, so it is day 3 of the quarantine, and I've only gone a little bit crazy so far. But since we will be in this situation for the foreseeable future, I have another evolution lecture for us to go over, and this is on what are called homologous structures. I've touched on this a lot before in our class, so I'll try to be a little bit brief. We'll see where that ends up. Anyways, so if we begin with homologous structures are modifications of existing structures that all organisms have. So we're going to begin with the coelacanth, the lobe-finned fish, right? So it has these bones in its sort of meaty, fleshy type of fins, and those over time got modified into appendages, we could say, creating the first stem tetrapods, right? So all animals that sort of walk around on the land. And there's plenty of other things here too that we could touch on, but we're just going to focus on the appendages for now. And then that takes us into the early stem amphibians and things like that. Animals that are permanent land dwellers, right? Well, then the aquatic mammals evolved much later, and aquatic reptiles too, but they still kept those same structures in the arms and legs. So one of the keys to understand in evolution is that as a new organism with unique physical characteristics evolves, we do not start over from scratch. Evolution simply modifies pre-existing structures. It cannot randomly create fundamentally brand new ones, right? So as an example, a bat's wing is just a very large webbed hand, right? There are much less complicated ways of making a wing, but bats came from animals that sort of lived in trees. You can go to PBS Eons and watch a video on bat evolution that they did. So they weren't just going to sprout wings out of their backs, or something like that. And their wings are really complicated. It's all these bones and everything. But that was the only way they were ever going to adapt that, is by modifying an existing structure. So if we look at these arm bones of all these different vertebrates, which we looked at this before, but the human, the horse, the cat, the bat, the bird, the whale, right? We all have the one bone, two bone, wrist bones, and then finger bones, right? The whale just simply adds more finger bones, but it hasn't deleted any of the bones, right? The bird, we don't really see the wrist bones very clearly, and the finger bones have been fused together, but they're there. The bat arm is really just like ours, same number of fingers, same number of bones. They're just exaggerated in different ways, right? The horse has also lost all but one of its fingers, and we've looked at horse evolution before, so we can move on from here. But these are homologous structures, right? Derived from the same characteristic. So what we see here is this is a shark vertebra, right? Now, shark are cartilaginous fishes. They don't have true bones. So these types of things don't normally fossilize, but we can see them. Now that's very different. This kind of circular vertebra is different from the bony animals, right? With true ossified skeletons. But if we look at all these different vertebra, I believe it's human and chimpanzee on the left. I think that's a bison vertebra in the top middle. Now, bison famously have that giant hump. They get that just by having an extremely large spine. That's called the spinous process, which if you bend over or on your neck, you can feel those spinous processes. I think those are snake vertebra. Yeah, snake vertebra on the top right, mouse vertebra or something on the bottom right, and then on the very bottom in the middle, that is a sauropod dinosaur vertebra, so like a brachiosaurus or a giraffatitan or something like that. It's just an extreme exaggeration, but of the same thing. If we look at all these vertebrae, There's an opening for the spinal cord. There are spinous processes around it. And then there's what you call the body, the thicker part of it. So in insects all have legs, right? But an insect only has 6 legs. Now they're all kind of unique in what their role is. Some insects can walk on water. Some insects can leap unbelievable heights for their body size. Others, like a praying mantis, they have a really crazy, their forward arm has these spikes that stick out of it for grabbing and latching onto things. But they're all just modifications of the same general structure. Now, caterpillars are really funny because they have, you see a caterpillar, they're very long, right? But they still only have 6 real legs. Now, there's no bones, so these legs are different than vertebrate legs, but they actually only have 6. And they're way at the front of its body. If you look towards the head of this caterpillar, you can actually see it's only 6 legs. So what the heck are these other things? Well, these proto-legs are, and then they have the anal clasper at the back. They're really just muscular regions, and then this little outgrowth of tissue where they can just simply flex their muscles and grab onto things. They're pseudo-legs, right? And if we watch this GIF, we can see how or GIF, we can see how the caterpillar crawls around, right? They're not real legs, they're just modifying them, right? So, homology is the existence of shared ancestry between a pair of structures or genes in different taxa. And a taxa is a way of describing an animal group. So there are genes we all share. We're not talking about full-fledged species here at this point. We're talking about the features that species have, right? And those can be physical or genetic, right? Like I have genes in my physiology for mitochondria, right? I have mitochondria. Well, so does a tree, actually. Now, they have chloroplasts and I don't, but we do share the mitochondria and genes associated with that. So we'll stick mostly with physical characteristics. All tetrapods share the same limb design, which we've already looked at, unless they de-evolved limbs like whales and dolphins have, and snakes as well. We've covered that, so I can pretty much just skip over this. But the point is, animals may run, fly, swim, or dig, but they use the same bones to do all of these tasks. So the counter to evolution, which would be like intelligent design or special creation or something like that, if animals were designed, there should be no way that they all accomplish, in this case we're talking about vertebrates, there's no way that they should all accomplish very different tasks. Flying, running, swimming, those are extremely different things. Using the same fundamental build, right? As people, the first things we built were maybe like ships, right? For like navigating a terrain using means other than our own 2 feet, right? Well, how do you make a ship move? Well, you use oars, right? Paddles. When we invented airplanes, we didn't just use oars and flap them really crazily fast to try to get to fly. That just simply wouldn't work, right? We completely rethought the way we were going to fly. And even boats have been completely rethought in the way they work. Boats can use propellers or turbines or whatever else, right? But in evolution, in the animal kingdom, we can't just do that. We can't just start over from scratch with a brand new thing. Now, one of the really key reasons why we see homology is that all organisms develop from one single cell, right? So there's the old idea that like a sperm contained a tiny, fully developed human just tucked in there, right? And then it just gradually grew larger. If you've ever bought those little pills that have the sponge animal in it, you put it in water and it just inflates. That's what we thought living things were like. There's no way people would have ever thought that we start off as a cell that has no parts to it. It's just a single cell and then develops into the amazing creatures that we are. But we do, and when animals are only a few hundred or maybe a few thousand cells large, their appendages and other structures already begin to form before you can even tell what they are. So these early developing structures have no distinguishable form. The arm starts off as just a little bud. There's no fingers, there's no bones, there's no nothing in there, right? So as these limb buds and other things in our bodies develop, all they do is just grow differently, right? But they all stem from the same protostructure. So structures in newborn animals look so unique, but they share a structure that is extremely similar. So these illustrations are pretty simplified, but if you look at the very top, that's like really early on in development, and you can see that all these animals look very, very, very similar. If we go down to the middle, which this would be maybe a few days to a few weeks, depending on the animal, but we can see that all these animals still have like a tail sticking out, right? Humans, you can look at photos of, well, actually have some photos of human embryos. You have a tail that is pretty darn long, but eventually your body sort of grows into it and a bunch of it recesses away, right? And if we look at the arms and the legs of these animals at stage 2, there's nothing there to see. It's just this nub, right? So on the far left, I think that's a dog embryo. It could be a human embryo. I don't remember, but that's kind of the point. You really can't tell what kind of organism that is, right? And then on the right, we see a human embryo at 32 days and a cat embryo. I don't know what the time period there is. But you can see the little structures where the arm and the leg are going to come out of. You can see sort of what the head is. But where's the face? Where are the fingers? Where are the toes? They're not there yet, right? We all come from these very simple origins, and we just simply modify our bodies to fit around that. We have looked at this before, but it is worth watching again, the progression that shows how the human face develops, right? So, no, you don't start off with a fully formed face that grows larger. You start off with this face that is completely unrecognizable, and then it grows, it differentiates in a particular way that forms the human face, right? Now, the reason for that is because of shared common ancestry, and we'll get into the details with this as we move along. And that actually takes us directly into what are called these pharyngeal arches or gill arches. So virtually all vertebrates possess a group of lumps called pharyngeal arches early on in development, and they're present right around the bottom portion of the head or whatever. So we call these gill arches because in fish, and fish are the oldest vertebrates, these lumps become the gills along with a couple other accessory structures. But tetrapods, land vertebrates and all their descendants, so again, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds, none of us have gills, right? Except for some amphibians have gills as in their early stage, and a couple in their adult stage too. But the structures that form gills in fish have been modified and repurposed in us to do different things. So for example, in mammals, the gill arches become the larynx, which is your voice box, the hyoid, which is a bone in your neck that your tongue attaches to, your inner ear bones, your malleus incus and stapes, or your hamilanval stirrup. Fish have absolutely none of those things, right? But early on in embryonic development, we can see that the fish has these sort of lumpy arches, and we do too. And as we grow and develop, like the crazy face morphing video we just watched, they just simply grow into different things. What we do share is that in both fish and other vertebrates, one of the gill arches becomes your mandible, your bottom jaw, right? So here's admittedly simplified to make you understand what you're looking at, but a human embryo and a shark embryo, we both have a series of arches, and I believe we have the same number of the arches too. So this is very early on in development. If you look at the brains of humans and sharks, our brain is of course much bigger, we are more intelligent, but if you actually look at the number of nerves and what their job in the body is, I don't know what the trigeminal nerve does, but the facial nerve, it connects around your face, right? The glossopharyngeal, that would go sort of to the back of your throat. The vagus nerve, I don't remember where that goes. But the orientation of these things from top to bottom or back to front in the brain is the same in us as it is in the shark, right? Shark is a fish, older vertebrate, so we have common ancestry with them. Again, in evolution, we don't just start over from scratch and rebuild it in a brand new way. We have to just modify it in a new way that fits our purpose. And that leads to a lot of issues, actually. So here's the human embryo again on the far left, and the highlighted regions are what the gill arches are or where they are. And then as you become an adult, it shows where they end up being, right? So we really pull them into radically different spots in our bodies. So the repurposing of gill arches, it's led to some flaws, as I said. For example, what's called the laryngeal nerve, it starts in the brain, descends down to the heart, makes a loop around your aorta, and then it goes back into your voice box, your larynx. Now, in a giraffe, that is a bit of a detour, right? Somebody might say that the reason, like having a nerve that has to take such a long detour to get to your voice box, why would you design an organism that way? It makes no sense. I've heard people say, well, because you're supposed to think before you speak, which is funny. It's a nice little joke, but it doesn't actually mean anything. Another example is our wisdom teeth. They no longer fit into our skulls, or really our jaws, because our jaws are getting smaller. Shrinking a bone or a series of bones in the skull, that can be done incrementally, a fraction of a millimeter per generation at a time. That is extremely simple, so we can see that it gradually gets smaller. Think of domesticated dogs, how pugs have basically lost their entire snout. It wasn't just a dog with a long face gave birth to a pug with no face, right? We just slowly bred dogs with, in each generation that had the smallest face or snout, and then here we are today, right? So we have this curse of our wisdom teeth because our jaws have been slowly shrinking and our brains have been slowly growing. And now it's got to the point, it wasn't a big deal until fairly recently. Now our wisdom teeth don't fit anymore. I've had all of mine pulled out. Some people don't ever develop wisdom teeth. And maybe in 100,000 years, no human will have them. And another idea, or another bad design, is we breathe and eat through the same opening, which is absolutely terrible design. Insects breathe through tubes in their feet, right? So they can't choke on their food. Amphibians absorb oxygen through their skin, so they can't choke on their food either, or they can't suffocate on their food. So here we see that vagus nerve, and it's the one in yellow, and it goes all the way down around our aorta and then into the larynx. And here we can see the giraffe, right? Now the reason it's like that is because here on the left we can see the nervous system arrangement of the fish. Now, fish are like longitudinal, so like the head connects directly back with the rest of the body. And so the nerves really just kind of drop straight down and form sort of like rings or sections in their body. And for them, yeah, that vagus nerve to where it needs to go, it's just a straightforward path. But other vertebrates, mammals, and others have become way differentiated. And so that vagus nerve has just been stretched a fraction of a millimeter per generation, which each of those by themselves, not a big deal. But now we get to the point today where it's like, well, it's become pretty stretched out. For the wisdom teeth, right? So here are the pictures of our ancestors, other types of hominids, Australopithecus, Homo ergaster, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, so on and so on and so on. That gradual, we used to have very large jaws and smaller brains, but one's been shrinking, one's been growing. So the other picture here in the middle, that's a baby chimpanzee skull, and then below that is the baby human skull. And they're really similar. But we can see as the chimpanzee gets older, the morphing, and they keep what's in the original square in the same place. So we can see those squares have become extremely large and exaggerated, so they can fit a lot of teeth in there. But ours, not so much, and our wisdom teeth don't fit anymore. other examples of this, humans and other apes and guinea pigs, we are the only animals that cannot make our own vitamin C. Even most plants make their own vitamin C. But we still have the gene for it, right? So homologous things can be genes that we have. Now we have it, but it just doesn't work anymore. It mutated very long ago, and our tree-dwelling ancestors that lived in tropical climates, they had a diet that consisted of a lot of fruit, so they didn't need to worry about vitamin C. So it became unimportant for them to need to transcribe that gene. And then there we go. And then humans started doing human things, not animal things. And then scurvy was a condition that people got, but we fixed that now. Other examples, humans have a yolk sac during the first few weeks of our development. We don't develop in eggs, but we share common ancestry with organisms that do. Really, mammals are, for the most part, the only animals that give birth to live young. Some snakes do it, some sharks do it, but they're tiny exceptions to the general rule. Our tailbone, right? So it's pretty much useless, and it actually is detrimental. It gets in the way of delivering a newborn. And apes are the only vertebrates without tails. Every animal has a tail except for gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, humans, gibbons, and bonobos, and maybe a couple others that I can't think of. Some of you have the ability to wiggle your ears. If I raise my eyebrows, I can feel my ears wiggle a little bit, but I can't just move them independently. That's because some of us have an extra muscle that others don't, and we've all seen animals that can independently move their ears like crazy. And around 14% of us have an extra muscle in our forearm, a leftover from our tree-dwelling ancestors. I have that muscle. You test it by pressing your pinky and your thumb together really hard. It's kind of hard to show in this angle, but it's that one right there that sticks out really obviously. Weirdly, I don't have it in this wrist. You can see it's just totally smooth here, but I do in this one. I'm half evolved. So there's your yolk sac, and it really doesn't serve much of a purpose. I assume we use what's in there, but only for a couple weeks, right? Why not just keep that yolk sac? Why wouldn't it be larger? Well, because it's slowly going away. Tailbone, we all know where our tailbone is, right? And then there's that extra muscle. I don't remember what it's called. It's one of those ones on there. The pink region in the corner of your eye, that's all that is left over from a transparent eyelid, which is called the nictitating membrane that lizards, fish, and birds still have, but we don't have it. Goosebumps, they really actually do nothing for us. You get goosebumps from emotional reactions, but for animals that are furry, it does make them appear larger for defense, or it puffs up their fur to make their fur thicker for warmth. And even our behavior is homologous. Many of the innate reactions we possess have an evolutionary explanation, such as squinting and turning our head at something gross. So when something happens, we go like that, right? You're closing your eyelids as tight as you can. You curl your lip up to close off your nostrils, and you push your lips together also because that's where viruses are going to get in. And in this age with the coronavirus, that's what they've been talking about. Don't touch your face. Wash your hands and make sure you don't touch your face, because your eyes, nose, and mouth are the only way, and I suppose your ears, that's the only way for the virus to get into your body. Actually, viruses can't go through your skin. So the hand washing is really is step one. Step two is do not touch your face. So here we can see the bird, that transparent eyelid. We can't do that, but we have this little tiny remnant of that structure right there. Here we can see this adorable little kitten, and he's frightened, and his hairs are standing straight up on end, right? So you do have muscles that attach to pretty much every hair on your body, and it makes them stand up, but what is the point for us? It doesn't make us warmer. It doesn't make us look any bigger or scarier. It's wasteful. It has no purpose, but we still have it. There are way more examples of behavior, but what I'll finish with is just the idea that animals have emotion, right? All you have to do is have a dog own a dog for a week, and you'll see emotion in that thing. Intelligent mammals such as chimpanzees and elephants, they mourn for their loved ones. They have a real sense of connection to their own offspring. Any animal will defend its offspring, or at least its eggs, viciously. And sure, maybe they can't explain that, but it doesn't mean that it's not emotion. And you can see some meerkats giving each other a hug. That's cute, right? So that wraps up this lecture. You could go on and on and on with homologous structures, but I wanted to try to keep it short and simple. So enjoy the rest of your day.